Hi everyone, the next little tutorial we have going on here is the kind of idea or technique of using prefabs in Unity. And prefabs are a bit of an advanced technique that you guys should kind of start getting used to because it's a very powerful tool in Unity, but it can be really, really handy. There's definitely some downsides to it too because they do work kind of funky sometimes. But I'm going to show you a quick example of what prefabs are and why we use them. So when you're making objects in Unity and you bring them in here, these are just game objects. They're just, you see here, they're kind of colored as a black object, which means they only exist in the hierarchy and in the scene. In Unity, we also have the project view. I don't know how familiar you guys are with how that works, but the project view is where you keep all your assets, and then when you create something, let's say in 3D Max or whatever, then they all exist here and you can drag them in and place them in your scene. Now Unity primitives are just kind of, they just exist in Unity, so we don't have to make anything in the project view for these guys. But that being said, you will be making a lot of objects, obviously, and a lot of times they'll just be meshes out of 3D Max that you can just drag in and place, which is great. But let's give ourselves a little example of how prefabs could be useful and what they are. So let's say we have this hallway here, and I'm going to make myself a little light torch. Let's say I got a little torch here, right? I got like a stick that's on the wall, and then maybe I have another stick. Let's just turn the lighting off here for now. I have another stick here that's holding up something, right? Now we got like a little whatever stick formation, whatever it is, doesn't matter. And then we have like a little light bulb or light torch on top, right? Again, this is just Unity primitives, so there we go. That's our little light source on top. And then we're going to go in here and go to lights and create ourselves a point light. Oops, I created a spotlight. So we create ourselves a little point light here, and that's going to light up our hallway. Right, all well and good. Now, there we go. We've created a little torch. It's great. All right, we have some primitives. Let's say some of these, like all these primitives, could be a mesh from 3D Max. Then we have ourselves a light, which is a Unity object. It doesn't exist in the project view, right? We just create it and only exists in here. That's fine. But now let's say you had a massive hallway and you wanted to put 10 of these lights in here or whatever, however many. This is going to get to be a pain in the butt. Number one, I got to select my light and all the little cubes, right? So I basically got to select that guy, right? Sometimes even hard to select some things. Do I have everything? Nope, still missing that cube. Nope, not deselected things. So you can see it's just a pain in the butt even just to like select the things you want. There we go. So I'm going to go over here. I'm going to create this light. Now I have like 5 more objects in my scene, and if I did this like 10 more times, I would have, like 50 different objects, and they're all just called cube for now because I didn't name them. Then I have all these lights, and there's just a lot of objects to deal with, right? And you don't want to have a million little things to have to click if you want to adjust something. Let's say you went through and you designed your level, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, I need to move like every other object here. It's a pain in the butt to go through, select them all again. Or if you wanted to change the lights and all that, you'd have to find all the point lights for the torches and change them there. So what we're going to do is we're going to make something called a prefab. And a prefab is basically like a collection of objects and utilities. They can be basically anything. They could be meshes, game objects that are made in Unity, lights, particle effects, whatever it is you want. You can throw them into a prefab. So let's create ourselves a little prefab here. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create an empty game object. And so we got a nice empty object. I'm going to position this guy around my torch because I made my torch first. So I'm going to just put him somewhere around here, right? Basically, the empty game object is going to be your pivot point of your light. Right, so this is kind of how we did our hierarchy before, with organizing our scenes. We're kind of doing the same thing, but I'm going to be not zeroing out this pivot. I'm going to make sure the pivot is kind of where I want it around this torch. And I'm going to select all the different parts of my light, and I'm going to drag them into this game object, and I'm going to call this game object torch. So now I have one object to select and move around, which is great. It's still a bunch of different objects as far as Unity is concerned. Now, what I can do with that is I can actually commit it to my project view and make it an asset that I can use in different scenes. Because right now, if I opened up a brand new Unity scene, I wanted to drop this torch in here, I have no way of doing that. I would have to copy and paste it out of the scene, and it kind of just really still only exists in the scene right here. So in my project view, I'm going to right click here in my project somewhere, however your hierarchy is. I'm going to create a folder called Prefabs. Now typically I would make a folder called like environment assets, and then or like props or whatever, and then I would call it I'd call it Prefabs after that. Hey, why don't you let me rename this thing? Huh, it's being weird for me. There's no rename thing. Yeah, usually you just click on something. I'll let you rename it. Well, imagine we name that Prefabs. I don't know why this isn't working. Unity's just freaking out on me. I can select the top object here of Torch. I don't have to select all these other guys here. I'm going to drag him into that folder. So it's going to turn a little bit blue when I hover over it. And you'll notice here I have an object here called Torch that exists in my project view. You'll see over here I have a little preview of it. And now in Unity, that torch is turned blue. Now what blue means is a blue object exists in the project as well, not just in the scene. So that means if I make a brand new scene, I could just click this, drag in, and I have a new torch set up with my lights and everything. So it's nice and easy. You can basically make yourself like an asset out of a bunch of little assets, and then you can make it. So whether this is like a wall or a corner of something or a tree with whatever fruit and other things on there, whatever it happens to be, I can then add that to my scene. So now I can easily go through and like populate my game object or my scene with a bunch of torches, and I will show you why prefabs are super powerful. So now we have this prefab, and it's great because it's in a project. We can drag it into a new scene, all that great stuff. But we still have the problem of editing these things. So let's say I wanted to change the light of this prefab. So I can open up this prefab here. I could select point light. Let's say I wanted to make my lights orange. Right? What I can do is in a typical Unity scene, if these weren't prefabs, I'd have to go through and select all these different lights and turn them all orange. But since this is a prefab, what I can do is I can use this little menu up here in the inspector, and I can hit the apply button. Now what apply will do is it'll take any changes I've done to this prefab since dragging it into the scene and apply it back to this project, and then these will all reference back to the project and take those new changes. So if I hit apply, all my lights will turn whatever the new color is. Now, you might notice that as I'm changing lights, they're not all changing. Well, that just means you have to press the apply button to get those changes, which is nice. If I did want to go through and actually just change one of my torch lights to purple, I can do that, right? So I can still make them unique and one-offs without having to do that. Now, because I changed this guy to purple, and I go back to my blue light here, my prefabs are green, my new light is blue on here, so let's see what happens when I apply. It only changed those guys right there. It didn't change my purple light because it's assuming that you made that change to that one specific prefab on purpose. You're like, oh, okay, you changed it to purple for this one, I'm not going to undo that for you. So the nice thing about prefabs is they can accept changes from the project while still maintaining a little bit of individuality if you choose to do that. Now, if we go to this prefab here and we're like, you know what, I don't like this purple, I want to change it to blue like the rest of them, up in the menu here, there's also a button called Revert. When you hit Revert, it will just accept the changes back from here. Let's see what other kind of cool things we can do with prefabs. I can, let's say, go through and make a whole new game object. Let's say I'm going to make a particle system. Where are you? Particles. Why can't I see particle system? Is it game object? Oh, there it is. Effects. Particle system. So let's say I made a particle system. I'd say I was making, some bluish little sparks coming out of my light. right? Something like that. Let's just make a quick little whatever, right? This is not a good particle system, but whatever. Let's say this was really friggin' wicked, and I made some sparks coming out of my light source, or like a fire, whatever. Well, I'm going to take this particle system, and I'm going to drag it into this first torch, because that's the one I have, and I'm going to hit apply, and you'll see the little ninja stars appeared above all my different guys here. That means that they are all now ready to have particle systems. Now, particles only play when you have them clicked, so I still have to click on them to do that, but they're all there. And then let's do a little experiment here. We're going to turn this light to purple. Go back to our original guy here. I'm going to turn these things to green for whatever reason, and we're going to hit apply. Now, you'll see here that it kept my light purple because I changed it, but it still accepted any other change to my prefab. It still changed these to green, which again is a nice, powerful tool. If I add a new object here or delete an object, it will still try its best to keep the changes that I've done on top. Now, the only changes it cannot do are changes where you fully break this prefab. So if I go in here and I delete one of these cubes, I said, you know what, I don't want this. It's going to ask me, do you want to break this prefab? Now, if I go to yes, it's going to turn that prefab to gray or to black, and it's going to basically show me that, hey, this is no longer linked up to that project that you have. So any changes that you make from now on to the original prefab won't be accepted by this one instance of it because you've changed it too much, right? Changing things like colors and values and stuff like that is one thing. Fully deleting and editing the actual object is too much for Unity to handle, and it won't know what to do. That being said, that revert button is still always there. You can always revert back and get back any objects that you've lost. So prefabs are still super handy that way, and all that. So that's pretty much the awesomeness of prefabs. It's like a simple, really, thing that we do. But we basically create prefabs out of everything. If I make a chair in Max, I'll bring it in. I'll make a collision out of some Unity primitives. I'll throw both of those into prefabs, and then bam, I'll place my prefab, and it's always changeable. Even things that we may not really need to be prefabs in the beginning, I'll still make prefabs just because in the off chance that I want to add a particle or a light or a collision or do something to them and I want them to populate across my entire project, I'll just make prefabs out of everything just to be safe. And that being said, this is project wide, right? So if I make that particle system blue and I have this torch in 12 other scenes across my project, they will all become blue or whatever change I do to them. So it's project wide, which is really cool. Now, the only thing you should really worry about prefabs with is there's two bad things about them. Number one, nested prefabs don't work. So if I have a prefab and I throw in another prefab, if I apply this prefab won't be original anymore. Let's say if I had torch 1 and torch 2, you can't stack prefabs and have them like update within each other if there's only like one instance of them. And number two is really be careful about your pivot point. If I go through here and I move all of this up here, my pivot's still down here, but all my objects are going to be up here. So if I hit apply on this, all my stuff's going to get all crazy and broken. So really be careful when you hit the apply button. Now, the one rule of thumb that we typically use or kind of follow with prefabs is, let's just go back here. Now, let's say I've created my whole scene and everything's all placed and I've been working on my scene for a while. Typically, what we'll never do is select an object that's already placed in the scene and is being used, edit it, and hit apply. The reason for that is there might be one-off chances where I've changed the color on something or changed the collision and it's not easily visible at first, or change the pivot on things, and if I hit apply, it might screw up a lot of things. So typically, if I want to edit this prefab, I'll actually drag it in from the project view just somewhere else, just some blank area. I'll do all my changes on here, so I'll change this to green, right? I'll add like another game object in here for whatever reason, right? I'll add an extra object. Ooh, I did not rotate that very well. There we go. Then I will hit apply over here and watch them all change, and then I will delete this prefab. Why we do that is we are making sure that we're always getting the freshest project prefab in here with no accidental changes that might have been done in in the scene, right? And and that way we're not, you know, accidentally messing up our scene or screwing stuff up, right? Because you just never know. So I always drag in a clean one, do my changes, hit apply, and all that. I typically don't, you know, because if I go in here and I hit apply on this guy, they'll all change purple, and then I'm like, oh, but I wanted them green, and then you got to redo a bunch of stuff. So, you know, be careful with them. They can get a little tricky, but they are super useful, and we basically use them for everything. It's one of Unity's most powerful kind of features. Um, and all that. So get used to them. They're super important for artists, for designers, for coders. You can add animations to them. You can even add scripts. I can go in here and add. Let's say I wanted to add like a sphere collider, make it a trigger, right? And then I could add a script on here that says whenever you enter this trigger, turn this light on, and then just every time I place it, that'll just happen. I won't have to reset up my code or triggers or anything like that. So again, super handy, really powerful, and really get used to using them. So yeah, that's it. That's it for prefabs. So thank you very much.